Welcome to Module 2 of our Competent Vision and Outcome Management. In this session, we're going to consider the concept of vision statements and their role in program management. So what is a vision? Yep, it's a view of the future. It's something that we should aspire to. When you look at the desert, you kind of think, hey, how did anybody ever think of building great pointy things in the desert? What was going on in the head of that pharaoh when he had the idea of building those massive pyramids? Yeah, so there was clearly a vision and an aspiration about doing something. And equally, in the last 20 years, when somebody was looking at a different bit of desert in Qatar, who could have really imagined they were going to build these fabulous football stadiums? And who would have believed them either, you know? So this is what we're going to see in the 2022 World Cup. So visions are of a changed state of something really aspirational. Now their role in a program is really important. We've got the vision sets out where we want to go and what we want to be. Then we create target operating models, the blueprints contribute to it, and then we get business requirements. And at that point, we can start building stuff through our projects. Okay, so when we're thinking about powerful visions, we're thinking about, it's quite often graphically is more powerful than words. So we need to think about this. And during the training course, you're going to come across some ideas that we've had with others. But at this point, we just want to get those kind of theories across to you about why they're important. Let's have a little think about what Kottler said in his 8 steps of change and the role of the vision, because he was a great writer on this subject, and program management has kind of adopted his idea and turned it into a set of delivery mechanisms. So if we want to get change moving, the first thing we need to do is have a sense of urgency. All right, well, in the context of program management, that's really about getting something done, right? So your program wouldn't be existing if it wasn't for this. And then there's the idea of the guiding coalition. Yeah, who are the people that are going to bond together to make something happen? And we generally call them our program board, yeah, or our sponsoring group, or whichever term you want to use. And they elect somebody to kind of represent them, and that's what we call the SRO, or the program director. The next thing we need to do is develop the vision. Yeah, it's the thing that group can gel them together and say, we all buy into this. And then we communicate the vision. Yeah, then we deliver the actions and we empower people to do stuff, which will be 2 sides of a program. That will be the project teams, and now of course it will be the change teams. We look for quick wins. Yeah, so we get some sort of balls in the hoops nice and early to help keep the guiding coalition on board, take the rest of the organisation with us, create momentum, the never let up stuff, and deliver those culture changes. So that's what Kottler's step changes are, and we can align them into what we're thinking. The one bit he doesn't say in there is do the bit of detail about what it's going to be like. All right, and of course that's where we come into target operating models in the next module. So how does it fit into how do we take that Kottler image and how do we bring that into the program management world? Well, in this diagram, you can kind of see it coming together. So at the portfolio level, we will have corporate objectives that are operating and the business plan and the strategic alignments and all those big things they want to do. And they will cascade into our program. So as they come into our program in the form of objectives or a program mandate or whatever it is, we then take those objectives and turn them into something aspirational, which is our program vision. And then, as we're going to see in some of the later modules, we talk about, we create a blueprint, a target operating model and blueprint. We then know what we need to do to deliver the capability. We create our projects. We give the projects the requirements that give them and they describe the outputs that we're going to deliver, and then we do all the activities to make the project happen. And then we do the transition, we deliver business change, capability, that's kind of where we get what the projects deliver. The blueprint delivers the outcomes, hence the name of the course. And then once the vision's realised, we're then starting to see the benefits being realised, which you need to go and have a think about the competent benefits management course at that point. And then right back up at the portfolio level, we've got the objective achieved. So the vision is the first step of the program journey. So visions can come in many shapes and sizes. And this was a vision that we came across a few years ago with a client, which told a really rich story about what that organization was going to go through over the next 5 or 10 years. I won't go through it all in detail, but it was saying, look, here's why we need to change. They were basically saying their services were becoming out of date, that the industry didn't need them. It was basically an organization that checked lorries for compliance, and that they didn't need as many buildings, and the testing mechanisms would be changing over the years, and you could see their headquarters was going to move and all this sort of stuff. But for the people in that organization, they could kind of understand it. And as we were working there, we kind of got it. What I really liked was the bit over there where there's some boats rowing around without paddles. And it's saying basically, if we don't change, we're going to become becalmed or end up a dirty creek with no way out of it, and we'll end up becoming irrelevant. So there's some really interesting graphics in there that really captured what their change program was all about. Now, if you look at the second version, it's really setting out in black and white some words. Now, it depends who you are and what your emotional triggers are. But do you prefer vision 1 or vision 2? I know a whole bunch of people who prefer vision 1. I also know a whole bunch of people who would prefer vision 2. Just tell us like it is. So it just depends, but you can see that the version 1 does meet those criteria of setting an expectation and telling the story of the journey. You may well get it just from the words in vision 2. So there's no right or wrong way to write a vision. We need to be able to recognize that there's different audiences and they may need to be engaged in different ways. So it's worth mentioning the difference between a vision, which is the big aspiration, and the vision statement, which is the words that describe it, because you may need to have different vision statements for different audiences. But when you do that, be really careful they don't overlap and conflict, as you really will be in trouble. Okay. One of the key things that Kottler said is the vision has to create a sense of urgency, and we've added that to say sense of purpose. All right, because what the vision's going to do is drive the program team to maximize its performance and be really kind of dynamic. And it's actually going to need to engage the stakeholders, or you might even call them the victims of the program. So a few things you need to think about. Number one, it needs to be context, right? Writing a woolly vision about something that you're not actually going to be doing will just make it irrelevant to most of the stakeholders. So you need to be in the context. So like in the context of a changing world, maybe, the world's never stable. So we need to understand why we're making it. It may be linked to a strategic objective. Yeah, when you're doing your vision, it's really important if you're part of a portfolio or part of something bigger, that you are showing your alignment to bigger goals. Apart from anything else, it'll help you get your business case signed off, because everybody at the top tier of the organization will understand what the program's about. And trust me, that's not always the case when you're actually running a program. It kind of drops off their radar and they forgot why you're there. We need to understand the strengths of the drivers. Are we doing this program because we want to do it? Or are we doing this program because we must do it? So like a must do program, really, do you need a vision? Because if you don't do it, the end game is collapse, failure of the organization. But you do need to set that into the context in which you're working. So if you've got really strong, if you're a booming economy or a collapsing economy, what is the context and how much of it is resistible? So are you choosing to go on this journey, or are you being forced to go on this journey? Who is the audience, which is something I raised in the previous slide. Are you targeting your customers? Are you targeting your internal people? Are you targeting the program team? Are you targeting the business change team? Are you dealing with the people who are going to be losers from the program? Are you dealing with the people who are going to be winners? And we've always got to remember that. So you really need to be thinking about who the audience is and what emotional triggers it's going to make. As I've just said, winners and losers. Now, probably the worst vision statement I ever saw was one in the BBC, where basically they were launching a job cutting program across the organization, and they got themselves so wrapped up in the aspiration, they actually said, hey, imagine we're getting on a airliner and we're all going off to this wonderful island. And the reaction to those people whose jobs were under threat went, yeah, you're going to be throwing us off on the way without a parachute. So you've got to remember this kind of stuff about where it fits together, who the losers are and winners are, because you can trigger a complete the wrong reaction if you're not careful. Ambiguity versus certainty. Well, one of the criteria for a good program is that it survives the test of time. So you need a decent vision. So do you want to be ambiguous and keep it totally fluffy and it means nothing, versus creating certainty and potentially creating a stick to beat yourself with? All right, so you know, because if you're too certain about something that's going to happen in a few years' time, it's probably going to fail and they'll point it all out. Like you never did what you said you were going to do. So balancing ambiguity and certainty in the way you make those statements is really important, so you don't create something that you kind of is going to be held against you. What assumptions are you making, which kind of helps to clarify the ambiguity thing. You could be saying, we're assuming that, I don't know, that we won't have a pandemic, or there isn't going to be an economic collapse, and if there is, then these things might be different. But if you can creep some of those founding assumptions into your vision as well, maybe not calling them assumptions, just making them, kind of bringing them to light or unearthing them so people can understand them, then that will actually make it engage with the audience, engage with it. Now, finally, things you definitely don't want to do with your vision statement. These are pretty much a selection of things that we've seen in organizations, and they really help the program get itself on the road to failure. All right, so things like to-do lists. Yeah, the vision is not supposed to be the to-do list or a set of success criteria. They can go in the objectives, right? This is about selling the idea to people. We don't want it to be a mission statement, you know, the one liner, we're going to be the best in the world. That's not relevant to people, you know, that doesn't answer those other criteria. We need something that's tangible. Yeah, how long is the vision statement? Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? It depends how big the program is, but don't worry about actually setting out a couple of pages of what you want to go or what you're aspiring to achieve. Yeah, better to actually be clear about what you want to do rather than if there's a lot to say, you may need to say it. All right, so you know, it doesn't have to be one line, it doesn't have to be a paragraph. It's good if you can have it, consolidate it down in that way. That is really helpful. But you know, it's horses for courses. What you don't want is a load of management waffle going on and management speak, so it just confuses the messages. We don't want that, and we don't want a sermon. Yeah, somebody standing up telling everybody how the world should be, that we're going to be a wonderful organization and we're going to be all these things, when actually you're just telling people what you want them to be like. You're not engaging them in the process. And the confusing imagery. All right, now it's really worthwhile you just go out and have a bit of a tour of the internet looking for vision statements about how many of them fit this criteria. But in the actual course, we throw up a couple of those rich pictures. I mean, I love the Vosa one, but some of the other ones, I've got no idea what they're going on around. So if you create imagery that's not clear, it's actually worse than not having it at all. All right, so there's some things. You'll come across more of that in the course. Hope that proves useful to you. And as always, time for you to have a cup of coffee. Think about what you've heard. Think about what you've got to do as some of the preparation, and then hopefully you'll be able to take the ideas in. Always good to go back and look at your program's vision statement and say, well, did it stand up to the criteria of a good vision statement at some point? See you in module 3.